Welcome to Beyond the Business, the podcast for high-achieving men who've built extraordinary careers and are now asking, what comes after the exit? Whether you've sold the company, stepped out of the spotlight, or are simply planning your next move, this show is for the man ready to live with intention. We explore how to thrive in your 60s, 70s, and beyond through candid conversations on health, relationships, reinvention, legacy, and purpose. Because when the business card is gone, you're not done. You're just getting started. This is Beyond the Business. What comes after the exit?
Steve Adams here from Tiger Medical Institute, and I want to welcome you to the Tiger Longevity Podcast, where high-achieving men over 60 come to reclaim their energy, sharpen their minds, and protect the one asset that matters most, and that is their health. I'm your host, and each week we share science-based strategies and expert interviews designed to help you extend your health span, feel better than you did when you were 40, live the next chapter of your life with clarity and purpose, and to give you valuable information that will help you in this decade of life that is so key. So let's get started. I have today as a guest Mike Sciortino. I'm going to let Mike give you his background, but the title of what we want to talk about today is how to prepare for the largest liquidity event of your lifetime. For many private business owners, finding a new partner or steward for the asset you've spent years building can involve unique challenges and opportunities. In this session, we're going to explore the key questions and answers that you, as a business owner, need as you prepare for a successful exit. Mike, welcome to the Tiger Longevity Podcast.
Hey, Steve, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
So, Mike, tell us a little bit about your family, and then I'm going to dig into your background more. So tell us a little bit. I know you're a grandpa, so you're pretty proud of it.
I am a grandpa, and I'm actually heading your way here at the end of the month for my oldest grandson. He's playing in a baseball tournament there outside of Arlington, so we're looking forward to coming Texas way. But I am blessed. I will be married for 44 years this summer to my high school sweetheart. We've got 3 beautiful kids and 3 beautiful grandkids. And I've been blessed in a sense that God led me to this business actually over 40 years ago. I started out as a retail broker with E.F. Hutton. Many of you guys may remember that old name.
Yeah, the ads, right.
Through the years, manage client assets, work with business owners. And in the last 5 years, the focus has really moved towards adding an area that demographically, as we'll talk about, is just going to increase as baby boomers continue to get in a position where they're wanting to sell their business. So that's where we are. We target specifically and work with financial advisors, CPAs, and their clients. That's who we've had trust with for years, and we're just another part of the team. In terms of helping folks make a rational, informed decision.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And I'm someone. I fit this picture, in 2017, I exited a business I spent 21 years building. And it's a surprisingly complex season of your life.
Yes.
Because it's not, for me, I grew up middle-class kid. Every time I had a little bit of money, we put it in another store. So I literally had very little liquidity for 21 years. I had more liquidity when I was a banker as an employee than I had the entire 21 years as an entrepreneur.
Sure.
And then when I sold, all of a sudden I had all this cash. And to me, I have a finance background, so that was a little less daunting. For me, it was what am I going to do with my life partner here that now I'm not running into the business every day? What's my relationship with my kids going to be? I'm really worried about my health. I didn't feel well back then, and all the tax issues and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
What do you find are some of the headlines of the things that your clients communicate to you that they're worried about?
Hey, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, health is a very big issue for a lot of them. A lot of them have been hard drivers, for
Yep.
a number of years. And honestly, they haven't had time for, for the exercise. Some of them have, but many of them haven't. But they're at the point in life where they understand that and they know they're about ready to get on to the next chapter. And I find that, first of all, the process takes longer than you think. Even when you decide I want to sell, I'm here to tell you it's not a quick process because there's a lot of people involved along
Yeah.
the way, which I know we'll get into today. But
Right.
and our job and our role simply is to be that guide through the process, having gone through it with a lot of different owners. You
Right.
know, but they are concerned about their health. They're concerned about what am I going to do next. They're concerned about their legacy. Steve, when I first really focused with my advisors in this area, I really thought that the main driver was just money for them. It's
Yep.
not.
Right.
Uh, there are guys that tell me, look, I know you can get me more for my business, but you know what? My employees help me build this business. They're
Yeah.
important to me. My
And
legacy is important to me. What I can do for my church, my charities that I'm involved in is important to me, and it's not just money.
yep. Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, talk about what's ahead, this year and beyond, some important implications for people's businesses right now.
Yeah, this is an interesting year. Here we are in 2025.
Mm.
2024 was actually the diving board where everybody jumped off for, if you think about it, for what we do. Because 2024 was the year that the last baby boomers turned 60, right? And so there are a lot of them already in their 60s, already in their 70s. And like you said, what are they doing? They're in a position where they're starting to say, how do I leave my company? Who do I sell it to? How do I pass it on? So the implications really are that there's a lot more businesses that are going to come on the market, and one of the things that that's going to create is a lot of more opportunities for buyers, which means that buyers can be a lot more selective in the companies they buy.
Okay.
Now,
Yep.
so the second implication for those sellers is that if they're not positioning themselves now and
Right.
getting their companies in tip-top shape before they take them to market, they may not be able to derive the value that maybe they think they're going to derive.
Yep.
But on the other hand, we've got a network of partners that we work with because we're brought companies at all different stages. And I'll tell you, Steve, not every company that says, I want to sell today, as you know, is not where they need to be in
Correct.
order for
Yeah.
them to reap that maximum value. So we
Yep.
bring partners in, we work on systems, we work on processes to get them, where they need to be. But the other thing that I think is important is it's always who's the buyer going to be?
Yep.
Now, we'll talk about in a second the fact that we give a lot of these business owners access to buyers they never would have had before,
Right.
which I
Yep.
think is important.
It
But
is.
other than just the institutional buyers that have always been around,
Yep.
there are these millennials that now understand that I've had it with the job. I now want a business.
Yep.
I need a company. Now, here's the difference. When the baby boomers wanted to do that, they generally had to go out and start their own companies. What can the millennials do? The millennials can buy a business. If you're a baby boomer that has a company that's got good, consistent cash flow, that has a good local brand, and is in a position that you're connected with your customers, as a millennial buyer, that's a lot less risk than starting from scratch.
Yeah.
That's a huge implication, I
Right.
think, and a consideration for anyone considering selling their business right now.
Something else that I experienced, and so in my history of building up, not only as a corporate banker, working with a lot of people who ended up selling their companies that were clients of mine.
Right.
I also worked with a company that started from one location in Michigan into a national company. They did a roll up in their space, and I got to know those guys really well because I was their banker through that whole thing. And then in my pet business, we did 6 acquisitions
Right.
yeah, over about a 6-year period.
Right.
And one of the things that I saw consistently was the buyers that or the sellers that seemed to do the best had that balanced perspective of they knew what their lives, what they had a vision of what they wanted their life to be like post transaction, and
Yeah.
they didn't set such a firm, hard set anchor into a price.
Yes.
Is that I every acquisition I ever participated in, they did not get the price that they had anchored into. And I had to
Right.
spend months helping them think about other issues. And then they got comfortable because I said to them, what you want is a buyer who's going to execute on the transaction and do what they say they're going to do, not get
Sure.
the best price and have the guy bail on you at the end
Right.
and or try to retrade you at the end,
Right.
last
Right.
minute nibbling and all that junk that goes on. I mean, do you talk about those things as well with people?
We call it the readiness of the business and the
Yep.
readiness of the owner.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And where that really comes together is when the business owner makes a decision to sell, mentally, he's prepared to sell. And he has done either the preparation or the planning in his own personal financial matters
Right.
that he knows what that number is.
Yeah.
And like you say, when you can go into a sale with that, I call it peace of mind, and
Hmm.
about you, I think there's a better opportunity for you to be able to reach a fair deal, and
Right.
it's all about him getting the number that justifies the time away from family, the money invested, everything it took him to build that thing, in some cases from a garage to a multi-million-dollar revenue business, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's the readiness, if you will, that's important. And when he's at that point or she's at that point,
Right.
um,
Yeah. We don't need to say only men. That's for sure.
no, no, no,
Anybody.
absolutely not. No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
I'm
Mike, what are some key requirements for selling a company in the market right now, in the current environment?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is time or patience.
Okay.
Because as I said earlier, it's going to take you longer than you anticipate. Tip to tip from our initial conversation, through the money actually being wired into the bank account upon close, that time varies for every transaction. And the reason why that varies is because you have so many parties involved between
Right.
accountants and attorneys and getting the necessary documentation from the company through the entire due diligence. And there's just so many things that can happen, along the way. I'll give you a case in point. We have a deal that we have in market right now. It happens to be a business that they get the majority of their inventory from China. Think of the impact
Yeah.
now, all of a sudden. That came out of left field, if you will.
Right.
But has that
And
changed the dynamic? Absolutely.
yeah, a lot of the buyers are going to sit and wait until they see a settlement.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So, I think the time and we'll talk about the process in a second, but you've got to set the right expectation that it's not going to be a quick fix. It just
Sure.
it just takes time. Number two is the knowledge of the market, both locally, regionally, and maybe nationally. And then that bleeds off into what I refer to as the seller's perspective, because the seller's perspective and the buyer's perspective many times are very different. Case
Yeah.
in point, let's say you have an owner in Houston, Texas, and he has whatever type of business he has. Let's say it's $30 million in revenue. That business to that owner in Texas is probably valued a little different than a potential buyer from New York or maybe California or Chicago who looks at that business and say, wow, that's all he's valuing that business for? Why
Right.
is it? Because they can see, maybe as a strategic buyer,
Right.
they can see how they can take that business plug it into their existing customer base and create revenue. You know,
Right.
that's what causes a lot of these transactions is that you've got buyers that have a very loyal client base. They
Yep.
realize that a lot of their clients are going outside of their company to buy some of the products that if they had, they would buy from them. And
Right.
so it really is an easy way, if you think through it, of adding your revenue. So as a strategic buyer, let's say you're an owner today that has a goal, Steve, of selling in 5 years. You might work with somebody that says, okay, here's where you are today. Where do you want to be in 5 years? And what are we going to have to do to get you there? Well, one
Yep.
of the things might be is a couple of strategic purchases
Yep.
in order to increase that revenue, in order to
Right.
increase,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yep.
know, so
And
it's
the
the
other thing I always say with strategic sellers selling into a strategic situation,
yeah,
you can justify a little bit higher multiple too, because
yes,
you know what I
indeed.
mean? Hey, I'm not just going to give you a straight financial buyer profile deal when I know where this is going. And
Yes.
so I want to share in a little bit of that because you're going to, it's going to be by the time they're done and plugging it in and blow it up, it's going to be a one EBITDA deal. You know what I mean? So they
No,
can
no,
save
you're
a
right.
little more. Right.
You're right. And that's where that perspective really comes in. If you're working with an advisor that has orchestrated and transacted a number of those types of sales,
Yep.
he can bring that perspective to the owner that the owner, may,
Wouldn't know.
because he's so locked in on his business, may
Yeah.
not be aware of.
Right. He's thinking, oh, I'm just going to get 4 or 5 times. That's what you get. And yeah. And I know you know this. That's why I said that comment to draw it out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
No,
so
go
that was
ahead.
2 points. You had a third point.
No, no. Well, I had time, I had knowledge and
Yep.
perspective are our three
Perspective.
points.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Um, um, so the other thing that I have in my notes here is how does someone know it's time?
Yeah. And I have to tell you, there is no exact answer,
Right.
as you can imagine.
But there's
Um,
got to be principles, Mike, that
yeah,
you
no, there are
see.
principles and there are questions that I run across that I hear people ask. And the first question is, can I sell my business?
Yeah.
Is there a market for my business?
Right. Is it sellable? Huh?
Yeah, is it sellable?
Right.
And most businesses, it probably is in some shape or form, but it may not be. Hey, I will tell you, a business that is so dependent upon the owner, right?
Yep. I
That's an example, right?
whenever I was doing an acquisition, I always, because I've done 7 in my life personally, where I've acquired the business, and I
Right.
always start with what am I buying?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And if it's all
Yes.
about the owner, I'm buying the owner, and then I can't do that deal, or it's got to be a very low multiple deal with an earnout so that I can figure out with the owner with me if we can do this without him.
If you're a man over 60, let me ask you this. When was the last time you got a truly personalized look at your health? Not a rushed physical, not a you're fine from a 5-minute appointment. I mean real data, real insight into what's driving your energy, your sleep, your focus, and your future. That's exactly what the Tiger Health Assessment delivers. It's a concierge-level diagnostic experience designed specifically for high-performing men in this next season of life. You'll walk away with a complete health blueprint and a clear path to more energy, more clarity, and more years doing what you love. Visit tigerhealthassessment.com and take the first step toward your strongest chapter yet. Now back to the episode.
Exactly.
Right. And
Exactly.
so I guess my point is don't make it about you.
No, no, without a doubt. And then once he has a satisfactory answer to can I sell it, you know what his next question is, how much can I get for it?
Right.
And I would say that the answer to that question is different. Once again, going back to that time, knowledge, and perspective.
Right.
But an important thing here, I think, is to tie that in to the readiness of the owner. If the owner is ready, if the owner has his financial affairs in line, he knows what he needs to sell post tax
Yep.
in order to live the type of life he wants to live,
Right.
right?
Right.
But those are, those are just a couple of things. And then for the guy who really gets into the process and starts to say, well, wait a second, what can I do to make my company more valuable? And that's where we get back to the discussion we were having earlier. Man, there is a whole infrastructure in our business of
Mm.
what's called value accelerators. And
Yeah.
we have a lot
Right.
of those partners where they'll go into a business, work with a business on over a 6 month, 12-month, 18-month period of time, and identify what the starting point is, point A, and what the optimal point B would be, and then walk the owner and guide the owner to get them to that point. Obviously, you get to that point, your value is going to be a little bit higher than maybe taking it to the market where it is. And
Yeah.
I think that's pretty critical, for
Well,
many people.
I find that there's real opportunity there because they're already profitable. So if value accelerator consultants can come in and get incremental revenue, it's all on the margin.
Yes.
And so it
Yes.
drops it disproportionate. There's a lot of operating leverage in a positive way there, meaning it disproportionately increases your EBITDA. And remember, if you end up getting a 6 or 7 or 8, it's like 7 times that incremental amount is what you're
Right.
getting in value. And
Right.
the other thing is very few entrepreneurs know about who these people are. That's the value you bring because you know how to quarterback all of this.
Yeah, it really is. And I think the question that, and we'll get into the questioning in a little bit more
Yeah, yeah, yep,
well, but the question that I then really focus on is, when do you want to exit? When do you want to sell? And what do you want your involvement to be now and in the future? And the reason why I say that is you ask some owners and they say, I'd like to turn in the keys last month.
yep,
You get another owner and says, you know what? I would be comfortable in staying on for a year or 18 months to help in the transition of the revenue, the transition of the clients. Now, if you're a buyer, it goes back to your question, what are you buying? That creates some significant value for the buyer. If he knows that that owner is going to be there, continue along with his relationships to help the value of the business either stay stable or increase over
right,
time.
right. Yeah,
So,
okay.
I tell them they need to do that. And then it comes down to, what we alluded to earlier, and that is who do you sell it to?
Right.
And that has to do with, are you selling it for money? Are you selling it for legacy? Are you selling it to ensure the careers of your employees are maintained, that a company is not going to just come in and gut it out and lay off a bunch of people that have been near and dear to you? Those are all components
Yeah, right.
that, right, that you go through.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'd say you look at a combination of those five, and it, when we have an initial conversation, Steve, I'll tell you, I can tell a lot about where a business owner's head is
Yeah,
just after speaking with them for 45 minutes to an hour.
sure.
And, after you do a lot of these, you start to realize, I don't know if he's ready. And maybe what we need to do is we maybe need to go in a little bit different direction initially. Or you
Sure.
might have somebody that's, man, you can tell he's ready to go. I mean,
Yeah.
he's got the car packed up. He's ready to head out with his wife and go to wherever. But
Right. Well,
um,
that might not be good. He might really not be ready, even though he thinks he is. Yeah.
I, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
You know,
how does your firm, how do you guys help them tell their story, Mike?
yeah. We're at the point where I think we have a good understanding of what a buyer is going to want to see,
Yep.
what a buyer is going to want to hear, and why.
Yep.
And so the way that we help them tell their story is, as I mentioned to you, being that this is going to be the steward of the asset that they spent all these years building. Well, we need to find out more about what you've built. So one thing that has stuck to me throughout my career, I heard about it probably 35 years ago, and man, it's been a great companion along this journey. And
Yep.
that is, questions are the answers.
Yes.
So this is where, it might sometimes, sound like a bit of an interrogation, but that's not the intent. The intent is to find out the who's, the whys, the what. It's the five serving men, right? Why did you do this the way you did it? What would you do differently going forward? How would you envision somebody who's going to come in and change it? All of that really goes into the story that we can then take out to the market. Because I think it's important to understand is that once we know that, then we go to the financial data and we put our arms around it and we
Yeah.
say, okay, and we do this through an NDA. Everybody's comfortable with that non-disclosure agreement. They're comfortable in sharing the most sensitive, financial information of the company. And once we're able to do that, we're able to come back and give them an initial, and I stress initial valuation of the company,
Yep.
as well as possibly some real estate. Now, I think it's important to differentiate what we do maybe a little differently. We don't just do a paper valuation and come back and say, hey, this is where we think the number is.
Yeah.
We actually reach out to our Rolodex. Let's say we have a potential client that's going to sell a business in let's just say the lumber business.
Yep.
We're going to contact folks in our business, in our Rolodex, who we know have transacted business in that area, have the knowledge, the perspective, so forth and so on. They're going to give us some pretty good feedback on where it is. And then we'll take and look at that versus the company's information versus industry information. So all we're trying to do is give them an initial indication,
Right.
not a set number. Because
Right. You
understand
got to
that
test
the
it.
difference between our firm and other firms is that we are not listing agents. When we take a company to market, we don't put a number on it and take it to market. No,
Yeah.
we go out there as a selling agent and we let a competitive bid process drive the price of that business. And
Yeah.
that generally unlocks more value for the
Mike,
seller.
do you end up doing some kind of like a teaser document? You send it to people without all the data, but it gives them enough to indicate they're interested or not?
No, absolutely, Steve. What we do is once we get that information, and
Yep.
once we've had, generally a couple more conversations, maybe an on-site visit with the client, we'll enter an engagement agreement with them. And
Got
the
it.
engagement agreement basically gives us the exclusive right to
Yep.
represent them.
Yep.
Generally for a 1 year period, there's a 1 year tail period where if
Yep.
we started anything within the year, it doesn't close, it goes on. And then once we enter that, we put together a teaser piece. And
Yep.
it's generally a two-page document,
Yep.
and it's very generic. For example, if I were selling a business that you had in Texas,
Yep.
the teaser piece would probably say, we have a business in XYZ industry. We'd probably give them a revenue range, and this would be a business in the Southwest. So when you read this business, there's no shot that you're going to actually know who the company
Yeah.
is.
Right.
Okay, but you bring me to an important part of this whole discussion, and that is the reason why many business owners have not set out on this path yet is because they've had a business to run and they haven't had the time, even though they know that exit planning and doing the preparation and value acceleration is going to increase their value. So if we send out that teaser piece to let's just I'm just going to use an example of a deal that we actually did. We had a company. We sent it out to 200 folks in our Rolodex. We got 40 indications of interest. Okay.
Wow.
That was people that raised their hand and said, we have an interest. Now understand, why is that? Why was that number? I will tell you, first of all, that was a high number. But I think the reason for that is we called through our Rolodex and we just didn't send it to anybody. We sent it to
Right.
people specifically we felt would have an interest. So 40 people raised their hand and said, I have an indication of interest. I'd like some more information. So we then were in a position to send them the SIM, okay, the memorandum of,
Right.
certified.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in order to do that, they need to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Now, here's the value. that business owner does not have to worry about going back and forth with potential buyers 40 times. We
Right,
handle
right,
all of that.
right,
Okay.
exactly.
And
They need to run their company too and not let it run
that's
off
my
the grid.
point.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly. They've got to run. So we run that process. And that's why I said initially it takes time, but we run that process. In this case, we sent that out and we had 12 companies after looking at the sim came back and said, hey, we're interested in this company.
yep,
Well, I will tell you that parading 12 buyers groups to the town where a company's based, probably not a prudent use of anybody's time. And
right,
so what we'll generally do is we'll generally sit down with the owner, talk to the owner and say, okay, we got 12 firms.
yep,
Let me tell you a little bit about each one. Let you give us your perspective on which one you think will be a good fit or not.
yep,
And generally, Steve, what that does is that narrows down the scope to generally 4 to 6 firms.
yep,
Okay. Then we bring them in and we have what we call management meetings. They sit down with the ownership group. The ownership group can ask the tough questions. They can ask the owners the tough questions. And it's funny because the question we get all the time from owners is, when am I going to know it's the right group? And I hate to use a simplified analogy, but it's kind of like when you and your wife over your lifetime, I know you've had instances where you've moved and you've went and looked at real estate and you go out with an agent, they show you a dozen, maybe 2 dozen. Some of them may be very similar, but the
yep.
question, when do you know? You look at each other and you just know,
You
right?
just know.
And it's part of the process.
Yeah.
So from there, we narrow it down and obviously choose someone that we're going to commit to they're going to commit to us during the due diligence.
Right. So that means one LOI at a time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Yep.
yeah, it's exclusivity.
Yep. Right.
So that's why we spend the amount of time we do
Yep.
on the front end to
Yep.
to
Do you
to get it
tend
right.
to negotiate some performance risk penalties to the buyer so that they can't just screw around with management, due diligence, and then just, are there ways to protect the seller so that they're not being subjected to people like that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that is, I think we have some pretty frank discussions
Good. Yeah.
with the buyers.
Yep. Yep.
Because once again, we're representing, we're the advocate
Right.
of the seller.
Right.
It's no different than any other advocate they may have any other aspect of their life. And I guess the reason why our firm aligns with financial advisors and CPAs is I will tell you this, is having been in that industry over 40 years, it is an industry that truly cares about
Yeah.
what's right for the client first.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And so that's kind of what we do and how
Yeah.
we.
So to summarize, it's you get an NDA, you do an engagement agreement, you create a teaser document, you go out
Yeah,
and source perhaps a dozen potential buyers, you meet with management, you narrow it down,
right.
they come in and visit, and then you solicit who is going to offer LOIs, and you narrow that down to one, you give them a period of exclusivity, and then is the next step typically you'll move to a definitive agreement or a purchase agreement so that now it becomes more committed to the buyer and the seller.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yep.
Without a doubt. Now, what's an important component of that is
Yep.
the competitive bid process. Okay. We might bring these groups in, and I'll tell you, after those meetings, we've been asked every which way, what number is it going to take? And our answer
Yeah.
is always more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It-
So
it- it-
I missed that part. So once the dog and pony show comes in, then there's the competitive bid to see who gets the exclusive LOI. Got it.
yes.
Yep.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
so you can see the difference between this and just listing something. You
Right.
know,
Yeah. You're seeing their approach. Like
well,
each
yeah.
buyer might have a unique approach. Yeah.
Well, not only that, but you in my opinion, I think in a lot of transactions, money is left on the table just because of the perspective that the buyer may have could be very different than the sellers,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sometimes to the seller's detriment.
Yep. Yeah.
That makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Mike, This is incredibly informative. What haven't you shared that I have? What questions haven't I asked that you want to share?
Well, you know,
Because I've been thinking about, as someone who has sold a company and
right,
who
right, right.
I've been trying to ask questions based on my experience. I want to hear if I missed anything that you want to share.
No, no, no. I think the only thing I would want to share on it is that, for those who are at the stage where a sale is a real possibility in the near future, um, don't despair. There is no shortage of interested buyers. I mean,
Yeah.
there really are. There are buyers out there. The right buyer is out there
Yep.
for you. Why does the process take the amount of time it does? Because of the care that we try to take along the way to qualify. And Steve, I'm gonna share a story with you that really opened up my eyes to what we do every day.
Uh-huh.
I say the dollars are important, but the impact's important as well. I had a CPA that I've worked with for about 30 years, and I spoke with him not too long ago, and I said, "Hey, what's going on? What have you seen?" And he says, "Mike," he says, let me tell you a little story about what happened." He said, "I had a client that walked in, had an offer, written offer, put it on my desk for $52 million for his company. And, I looked at that and I'm thinking to myself, hey, that's pretty good money. But I sat back and I said, Mr. Client, that's a nice offer, but I'm not sure it's a good offer. And I'm not even sure it's a fair offer. If
Yep.
you'll give me some time, let me go out to the network and kind of see what I can do. And he went out and he was able, in a period of time, I believe it was like 3 months, he came back and they actually had an offer for the same company for $70 million. Now, what really hit me right here in the heart was the impact of that
Yep.
one advisor on the lives of that owner. Think
Yeah.
about it for a second. Now, obviously, the difference between 52 and 70 is 18 million. There's going to be some tax implication. But Steve, let's say, for example, that owner, as many are he's a member of a church, and the pastor has the aspiration of building a new church. He knows he's an owner of a business. He has an idea in mind of what he might be able to pledge to that building drive. And the pastor may have in mind, for example, that I think he probably $100,000. And you talk about God putting experiences in your life. As much as I've had the business side of my life, my pastor asked me about, well, now it's been 15 years ago, to be the head of a capital campaign. And I got to see a side of the financial world that I never saw. And that's why this story really impacts me, is because, he may have approached that particular business owner thinking that he could make $100,000 donation because of the impact and the care of that advisor to step back and say, look, this is an unsolicited bid. In your experience, are unsolicited bids usually higher or lower than the actual value?
Yeah. Right.
Right? So he
Yeah.
did that. So now that owner is in a position to give
Millions
a couple of million, right?
or
And to
more.
me, yeah, or more, or to causes like you have, or other charities out there.
Yeah, I was just doing the math, if the guy was able to give 2 extra million, he would be able to start fund for international businesses mission, 2,000 more businesses.
Exactly.
Yeah, around the
E-
world. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, I
Exactly.
know. So,
And Steve, that's what, people ask me all the time. They say, what do you really like about what you do? And I say, it's one word, it's impact.
yeah,
It goes beyond dollars and cents. It's
right.
the impact. And
Well, and
I talk to so many great business owners, and when I share that story, I can see their wheels already turning,
yep.
of when they get to that point, what are they going to do? And if
Uh,
you and I accomplish nothing more today than to open up that window, I think we can put our heads on our pillows tonight and saying, man, it was okay.
100%. And what I'm passionate about is I exited, I was not feeling well. I completely reverse engineered and created a brand new narrative around my life because I completely restored my health. And
Sure.
now I believe fundamentally that short of some weird thing that happens, I have a good opportunity to be into my mid 80s being productive.
Sure.
And
Sure.
that wasn't even on the radar 7 years ago for me.
Right.
And that's what I love in terms of the impact that we do is we take guys that you help and now they got all this time and it's like how do I enjoy the fruits of my labor longer, and we help guide them in that part of the world, and it's just fun. It's just fun to see people wake up to a new reality, and then it because it impacts their marriage, their kids, their grandkids, everything.
Oh,
You know,
and it's a function of one thing, Steve. It's awareness.
yeah, awareness,
Yeah,
right?
awareness. I mean,
Yeah.
because a lot of people aren't aware of what you offer in that regard.
Well, and same with you. Yeah, you know what I mean, it's that's why
Yeah.
we do these things is so that
Yeah.
people can get educated. Well, Mike, I am so grateful for you appearing on the Tiger Longevity podcast.
Well, Steve, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you guys a lot.
If today's conversation sparked something in you, share it with a fellow founder, leader, or friend who's navigating life after the exit. And if you're ready to design your next chapter with clarity, health, and purpose, this is just the beginning. Subscribe now, leave a review, and be sure to tune in next week as we explore what it means to thrive when the business card is gone. Until then, keep building a life that matters.